Blake Corum will be a top 12 fantasy running back if he lands with the Chargers. Marvin Harrison Jr. has wide receiver 1 potential if he lands with the Cardinals. We discuss the most desirable vacated roles throughout the NFL in today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and now draft and free agency for sportingnews.com. And we're down here a week and 2 days from the NFL draft.
Yeah, cannot wait. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So we have the draft, like you just mentioned, 9 days away. And we are seeing rookies contribute immediately more now than ever, right? Like today's NFL, you got to come in and you have to be a part of the offense right away, especially if you're an early pick. So we're going to get some good fantasy assets out of this draft. Really great wide receivers, a couple running backs that could also be very fantasy relevant. So let's start with the best landing spots. Teams right now have desperate needs across the NFL, but what ones are the best ones for these rookies to land in? Let's start with running backs in this class. Now there's 2 openings right now that seem like the clear best fits for any of these rookies to come into and have fantasy success. It's the Cowboys and the Chargers. I think I lean the Cowboys being the number 1 landing spot for a running back. But is that fair to say, even though we just saw Tony Pollard kind of fail in that position, was that more on Pollard or more on the Cowboys system?
Well, I think a little bit of both, but it is a major void right now. Let's be clear about that. All these other teams that kind of lost backs, where it was the Titans, we saw Derrick Henry go to the Ravens. They jumped on Tony Pollard. The Packers had Aaron Jones move on to the Vikings. They moved on with Josh Jacobs. The Eagles moved on from DeAndre Swift, who landed with the Bears, and they went with Saquon Barkley. So of all this merry-go-round, we didn't see the Cowboys decide to jump on. They just brought
Not
back
even
Rico
slightly.
Dowdle.
They brought in nobody.
No. Yeah, they have Deuce Vaughn behind Rico Dowdle, and Malik Davis right now would be their 3rd running back. So that tells me there's a lot left there that they could add to this backfield. So it clearly is the number 1 landing spot. And the one guy that's been mentioned a lot for them is going right there out of Texas. I mean, we had Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson last year. We have another Texas back on the top of the boards, Jonathan Brooks. He's the one guy that can handle the ball for 3 downs, and we've talked about that. They could also look, if they want to change the direction and go for a power back, Braylon Allen or someone, they could look at Blake Corum as well and give them a little bit of Tony Pollard kind of style of running there. So there's a lot of ways the Cowboys could address this position. They also have to look at their offensive line early. They've been tied a lot to Jackson, Powers, Johnson to really help up at guard. So they're going to upgrade their running game. They need better blocking. They've got to shore things up. They lost Tyler Biadasz as well, their center. So there's a lot of things the Cowboys have on their to-do list to get with their run blocking and running game. But we know the Cowboys still want to do that here with Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer. That is an important part. They just couldn't do it as effectively. I think Tony Pollard just wasn't in the right mold as that Ezekiel Elliott type back. So they need to maybe get a combination of those 2 backs in this backfield, and Dowdle can be explosive at times, but he's a backup. He shouldn't be any more than that. So number 1 thing we look at, Michelle, is talent for a rookie to have immediate impact, but you also have to have the location and the opportunity. The Cowboys, I think, doesn't get any better than that for a rookie running back. And that rookie running back, I think, is going to be immediate target as an RB2.
Yeah, it does think about Jonathan Brooks tearing his ACL, because I think if that didn't happen, he's considered a late first round pick in the NFL draft. But now he still should go in the late 2nd, probably, right? And it just depends on how soon can he start to contribute. Will he be ready for the week 1? But also, like, as a rookie, not getting that off season, that might also be a struggle. So that's our biggest worry about Jonathan Brooks in fantasy. Right. Will he be ready to go and contribute in season 1 as a rookie? But he is, I think, by far the best running back in this class as like an all-around running back who could really be a top 10 running back. I could see the Cowboys going Jonathan Brooks, but then what do they do at the beginning of the season? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Now with the Chargers, they could go with a Jonathan Brooks, right? Because they have Gus Edwards there. He could manage the workload for a little bit until Brooks is ready. But right now, both their top two guys that got any carries last year, Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly, are no longer on the team. So, I mean, that backfield is wide open for anyone to take it. They signed Gus Edwards, but I think he's more the Josh Kelly role than being the lead back. Everyone has Blake Corum connected to them because of John Harbaugh, which makes sense, from Michigan. My concern with this Chargers opening is, yes, it's amazing for volume, right? There's a wide open spot. However, they were the worst run blocking team per PFF last season, and they haven't done anything to change that. They replaced their center, sure, but it's not really like they got an upgrade at all. So that's my biggest worry. Now, maybe instead of going wide receiver in the first round, they go with a tackle like Joel Alt and try to fix up their line there. And then they take a running back like Blake Corum in the third round or second round or something like that. But I do think Blake Corum in this with the Chargers offense could be a really, really nice fantasy asset.
Yeah, the one good thing is we know Gus Edwards is a power back, so he might be a little bit more dependent on that run blocking being short up. But we also know Austin Eckler, when healthy, was a big asset on this team as a receiver. So that's why I think people are looking at Corum, because he can be a change of pace. He's trying to improve as a receiver there. I think he would be a good complement there, like the J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards at its very best. Now, we didn't see that very long because Dobbins and Edwards were constantly hurt. So we didn't see that materialize in Baltimore under Greg Roman. Now, last year, Edwards ran in the new offense with Todd Monken, and essentially what he was touchdown dependent. He was closing a lot of drives here. Good power back, but again, that's what Gus Edwards is. He's not going to suddenly be involved in the passing game and see key targets from Justin Herbert. That's not going to happen. So it's telling us, it's screaming at us the profile of back that they're going to go after. There's a lot of these change of pace type backs that they can really target in this draft. So I think Corum would be number one. Again, that Harbaugh connection cannot be denied. He's going to trust some players from his team in college, in the NFL, and we'll definitely see at least one Michigan player. Maybe it's their center later or guard in this draft. But overall, I think it's a good spot because we know what Edwards is. He's a power back who scores. In a lot of the other situations, I thought about the Giants a little bit for this, but Devin Singletary, they did invest some money. Are they going to really care that much if they're going to become more of a passing team here? And do they really want to invest too highly? And Singletary was very effective. Keep that in mind with the Texans down the stretch where, again, I think there's a cap to Gus Edwards' snaps and what he can do productive wise here, and also not going to be involved in the passing game. So if they don't improve the run blocking all that much, we're going to be more interested in the receiving back, change of pace guy than we are Gus Edwards scoring a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, I also was considering the Giants, but like you brought up with Devin Singletary, he's the most annoying type of vet.
Yeah.
Where he is going to ruin, especially in this class where there's not any dominant running backs coming out, especially with Jonathan Brooks coming off the ACL. Like these other guys that would join the Giants, they're going to be sharing that backfield at best with Singletary. And then you don't really want to split the backfield with the Giants. It's already kind of a gross enough offense as it is. You don't want to have to split the few amount of snaps that you do get on the field on offense and then the scoring opportunity. So I actually ended up changing my mind there. It's not a good landing spot. Maybe the Raiders, but again, whoever's there is going to have to compete with Zamir White, who is another young running back that can be considered just as good as most of these guys coming out. So the Cowboys literally have no competition, and the Chargers, you're just competing against an old Gus Edwards. Like, I don't even know if he's that old. He just feels so old to me. And I'm just
I think
not
his name is Gus.
Edwards
That's why it sounds old.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards sounds like a really old name. But yeah, he's also had some knee injuries and he's limited. And we know he's a limited power back and he can't give you that much more. And probably he's already overachieved in the NFL. Now, those are two pretty good landing spots, the Cowboys and Chargers. But what if I told you the wide receiver landing spots might be juicier here? I think it's very exciting because also the wide receiver class, no offense to the running backs, much better there. So looking forward to breaking down the three best landing spots for those rookies in our next segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored and brought to you by BetterHelp, and it can be tough. And it's been tough for me down the stretch here as we've gotten to spring, and there can be some thoughts that kind of lead us astray and keep you up at night and just race through your mind. And I've been battling through some of those, but thankfully I have a therapist on my side. I've been seeing them regularly to really help me get back on track. When I'm a little off track, they're going to get me there and help me find the right direction and be where I need to be mentally to continue to really find what's important to me in the time and space there that's going to make me healthy. Well, that's what the benefit is with online therapy as well. And BetterHelp is going to provide that for you in the way that is convenient and comfortable for you. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try because it's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule and needs. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So you make sure you have the right fit. Learn to make time for what makes you great and fantastic with a BetterHelp, and therapy is going to get you there. With BetterHelp, you just visit them at betterhelp.com/locked-on to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/locked-on to get in on BetterHelp now. All right, a quick programming reminder, and we are almost there with the 2024 NFL Draft. It's Locked On NFL's mock draft live on April 17th. That's right. That's on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series at April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern time to see what local Locked On experts are thinking for every NFL franchise with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. Yep, I'll be on there as well. Locked On NFL mock draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern time, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, we definitely are going to be breaking down a lot of these picks for fantasy, and hopefully at least this first one will come true. So the three teams that we've selected here that have really great wide receiver landing spots for rookies after two great classes, by the way, of rookies producing, the Arizona Cardinals, clearly at picking number 4 overall. Right behind them, the Chargers at number 5 overall. And way down a little bit in the first round, the Bills. And again, this class is deep enough to look at wide receiver in later rounds. But let's start with the Cardinals. And when we say this is the best landing spot for rookie, we're specifically talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. So let's break this down. I mean, this is a no-brainer, right, Michelle? I mean, right now it's Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. These are their two best receivers in Arizona. They're not Trey McBride.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild that you're going into this draft and Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, and Josh Allen all do not have a true wide receiver one on their team. And that means there's going to be some really amazing rookies for fantasy this year. And again, it doesn't mean it has to be those top 3 guys, right? But with the Cardinals, with the spot they have at number 4, if they stay there, if they don't trade out, that has to be Marvin Harrison Jr. And he gets the best. In my personal opinion, this is the best landing spot among the Chargers and the Bills because what you just said, like the other teams do have some veterans, right? Like some veteran players. With the Cardinals, it's just Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch at wide receiver, and the top 2 wide receivers in targets last year, they're both gone. There's over 200 vacated targets last year, and just the wide receiver vacated targets. Like, I think Marvin Harrison steps in and gets 150 targets immediately, and I think he's more than capable of doing that and succeeding and having a really, really great season with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at him potential wide receiver 1. That's how good this guy is. I mean,
like the wide receiver one.
Yeah.
Not even just a wide receiver one.
Yeah, you could be. We saw what Jamar Chase did, and some of these guys have done as rookies. They've been fantastic and been right up there near the top of the boards. And Marvin Harrison, look, the name is there, but he's bigger, faster, and stronger than his dad was. And he was an automatic fantasy stud there with Peyton Manning. So I think you're going to see a lot of that with Marvin Harrison Jr. I think him and Kyler Murray connect really well. We've seen Kyler Murray with DeAndre Hopkins, how fruitful that has been. So I think that picks up where it left off with that connection in its prime, because you need this guy. You can line him up all over the field. He's going to score. And that's one thing he's going to do a little bit better than some of these other younger wide receivers. He can score. He's got a big body that can work itself into the red zone, and then he's going to be busy all over the field. So I think he could have a massive rookie year, and he's probably the early favorite based on all these quarterbacks maybe being scattered and maybe not being on the best teams for maybe offensive rookie of the year. So we're going to look at Marvin Harrison now, watch somebody come and snipe him ahead of them at number 3 or something. But the Cardinals, you can bet, are going to be all in on Marvin Harrison Jr., despite what Budda Baker said and saying Robitussin was better. No, Marvin Harrison is better, and he's going to end up with the Cardinals. Now, let's table the Chargers, because we've already talked about the Chargers in detail, but the Chargers actually have 2 great landing spots here. Let's look at the Bills. This one is very interesting to me, Michelle. Khalil Shakir right now is their number 1 receiver. They added Curtis Samuel. They've got some other guys lingering. Did you know that rounding out this depth chart includes Mac Hollins, Andy Isabella, and KJ Hamler are all on the roster right now, guys that were scattered with other teams. They're now there. So there's not much here at all. Really, Shakir and Dalton Kincaid are pretty much their top receivers.
Yeah, I mean, they need size, right? This is a really, really small wide receiver group. Over 300 vacated targets from last year. So Diggs is gone, Gabe Davis is gone, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, like almost all the wide receivers are gone from last year besides Shakir. It will be the same. But also, like, all the touchdowns are gone. Diggs and Davis, they combined for 15 of Josh Allen's 29 passing touchdowns last year. They caught over 50% of Josh Allen's touchdowns. So who's going to reap the benefit of that? Maybe Dalton Kincaid, but I don't think these little shorties are going to come down with 8+ touchdowns next year. So they have to bring in a guy. And one guy I was looking at, it's probably a second round guy, Troy Franklin out of Oregon. He gives them height. He gives them speed. He was very, very productive. I know it was on a lot of go routes, but he doesn't have an extensive workload of like running a lot of different kind of routes, but he could be the Gabe Davis in this offense pretty much instantly. He's like MVS, but he can catch,
Yeah.
He has that kind of ability, like a Christian Watson and MVS, but he's actually able to catch the ball. He's had no issues with drops. He's very good with using his hands to catch. Very, very productive last year with over 1,300 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. So I think he can instantly fill that Gabe Davis role. They still have the issue then filling the Stephon Diggs role, but they can use the Shakir and the Curtis Samuels to get the volume targets, spread those out. But they need that bigger guy that can help out Josh Allen deeper down the field.
Yeah, I think if they're going to target a first round guy, it'll be Brian Thomas there out of LSU. And it's kind of interesting. You have him. We know he played with Jaden Daniels. You've got Rome Odunze, who played with Michael Penix. And then you have Franklin, who you mentioned, who was very close with Bo Nix. So we've seen these guys work with top quarterbacks in college, so we can make that easy transition here to a big armed guy. And like any of these guys, I mean, Thomas, big, 6'4". He was there with Jaden Daniels, who can fling the ball downfield anywhere. We know Josh Allen can put the ball 100 yards downfield if he really wanted to. So it's interesting. I think they need to double up on wide receiver here. I mean, that's how weak they are. Another direction they could go is look at a Ladd McConkey to be a very technical guy in the middle of the field. I think Keon Coleman would also fit that a little bit more, maybe not the absolute blazers, but guys who can run good routes here and be more in that Stephon Diggs role, and then go after maybe their bigger deep threat later in the draft. So there's many ways the Bills can approach it, but I mean, it became a massive need. It was already a considerable need when we weren't sure if Gabe Davis would return. Then Gabe Davis signed with the Jaguars, and we had this thing happen with Stephon Diggs go down pretty late in the process, the trade to the Texans. So look, I think there's 2 opportunities here for Bills receivers. We'll see. If they only draft one, that's going to be good news for Shakir. I think he could carve himself out a pretty nice role. And then you're looking at the top 3 targets on this team are probably the rookie, Shakir, and Kincaid, and then working to Samuel and spreading it around with Dawson Knox and some of these other guys. So we're going to be very interested who's going to be the go-to guy for Josh Allen, much like we were with Kyler Murray, maybe even more so. Now, the last team, guess the Chargers are up again. Remember, they moved on from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So here we are. Their depth chart reads like this, Michelle. Joshua Palmer, Disappointing first-round pick so far, Quentin Johnson, Simi Fehoko, and Darius Davis. So this is it. This is their 4 wide receivers right now. They've got to go get some receivers. So again, another team that could double up. What are you thinking? Do you think they'll go early at that number 5 overall pick with a wide receiver?
So this is the thing. Their top 3 targets from last year are gone. Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett. And then that's not even counting Mike Williams, who only played 3 games last year, but also gone. So over 300 vacated targets just from last year. I don't think they double up because they didn't fix their offensive line. I feel like they didn't do enough in free agency to allow them to really, they could easily fix their wide receiver room by going, taking Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze in the first round and then going back and taking a guy like Roman Wilson. I feel like that would instantly actually upgrade the room from last year. But I'm getting more and more worried that they're going to go offensive line in the first round and ignore those big 3 wide receivers. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but with their mindset with wanting to run the ball and play defense, and with Jim Harbaugh like wanting to play power football, I'm getting more scared that they're going to take Joel and ignore the wide receivers. I will say, whoever they take in the second round, I'm still going to be highly interested in for fantasy. And one guy that makes a ton of sense is Roman Wilson, a Michigan wide receiver. Again, like we're just connecting all these Michigan guys to Jim. That's fine, but you can get him in the second round. He's probably one of the better route runners in this class, maybe the best one. Great hands, very, very reliable. He's like a smaller Keenan Allen, except even with that small size, he caught 12 of JJ's 22 passing touchdowns last year. So like more than half of the touchdowns by thrown in Michigan last year were caught by Roman Wilson. I kind of really love this fit. And if a guy like him were to land on this team, let's say they don't take a wide receiver in the first round and they go with a type of player like a Roman Wilson in the second, I think he could be a top 24 wide receiver in his rookie season.
Yeah, we're going to watch this carefully. And this, again, who do they go after first? The field stretcher that's big, like Mike Williams, much like the Bills, right? Do they go after the technical potential number 1 who runs the routes, Diggs first, or do they go after their deep threat that replaces Gabe Davis? Same thing here with Allen and Williams. So I think I'd be more interested in an Allen type because of the way this offense works. And Wilson can be used as a slot. He's not as big as Keenan Allen, but he's still capable of being very active out of the slot. And again, it doesn't matter where they come from, if it's a slot or outside. We talked about that. We just want the guy that's going to get the volume and deliver there. So it's going to be interesting, but here's a way to look at it. The first receiver that these guys draft is the one that you want to think about because that's the priority they made. They're going to tell you, and they both need offensive line help. So they're going to say, okay, we're going to draft this guy and we're going to tell you that this is the guy we prioritize over receiver 2. Now we've seen it often, like in the Packers case, right? The guy drafted after is more effective because they don't know. It's a little bit of a speculation here, but I think again, there's such glaring weaknesses now on these teams that if they go past the second round and the Bills and Chargers don't address this position, I'll be stunned. I think you'll get an impact player. And I think, Michelle, you mentioned Franklin. I think he's going to be a guy that they're all going to go after if they don't go after a wide receiver in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. And I know people are going to be worried about Herbert's passing attempts. They're going to go down a bit. It's not like it's going to be, they're going to still throw the ball. It's not like they have a dominant defense either. Like they're going to have to throw the ball and he's going to be more efficient as long as they get him playmakers, right? In this new offense, his yards per attempt were so low last year. His completion percentage was lower than usual. His touchdown percentage was so low. Like those should all go up, which will all equal itself out. There's going to be production here to be had in the Chargers passing game. We're going to get into the best landing spot for a rookie quarterback and a rookie tight end in our final segment right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. I have used the Game Time app hundreds of times in my life. I don't even think I'm being dramatic. Every Sunday, if the Steelers had a home game, I always got suckered in. I had to go watch it. And I would just jump on the Game Time app right before game. I knew I was going to get the cheapest tickets in a great spot because I could see exactly where I'm sitting. And I always knew It's going to be such an easy process. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account on the Game Time app and then redeem code Locked On NFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I think there's a very, very clear cut best landing spot in terms of rookie quarterbacks. Now, I say that, and it could be the Bears, sure. But I think the Vikings have a better infrastructure right now with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson when he gets back, and then a veteran and Aaron Jones in the backfield, and then a really, really good coach and Kevin O'Connell there with a good system that loves to pass the ball, right? So this has to be the best landing spot for a fantasy quarterback to put up fantasy production. Do you agree with me with that?
Yeah, I mean, if we examine this a little bit, the Bears, is it more that Caleb Williams is the quarterback, or is it about the Bears' atmosphere? So I think here's how I look at it. The Vikings have the atmosphere to lift the quarterback and make him maybe more productive than his talent might indicate initially, because he's not going to be Caleb Williams, so there's going to be a bit of a drop-off. But yeah, those weapons are incredible. Also, you have Christian Darrisaw on the offensive line, so you have someone blocking, and they're going to keep that quarterback upright, or if he wants to extend plays, all that is there. The weapons are impeccable. I mean, when you have arguably the best wide receiver in the league, you've got a second-year player now at Addison that was a first-round pick. Hawkinson should return from his injury not too late in the season, and Jones. So you have everything there that's going to support a quarterback. So look at the options. They've been thinking about trading up for Drake May or Jane Daniels, but JJ McCarthy seems to be kind of the sweet spot of where they can trade up and get a quarterback. So all these things to consider. But yeah, that quarterback is going to be put in great situations because he's going to throw to Justin Jefferson. It could be JJ to JJ all over the field, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So, and you can't discount Addison's role. I mean, he's rising. I mean, there's a reason they used an early pick on him, despite already doing that with Jefferson just a few years ago, because they thought he had a big impact and could replace Adam Thielen in a big way all over the field. So, yeah, 2 weapons already that are pretty premier. I mean, these other teams are kind of sorting out the secondary weapons and just having the extra guys that they can throw to. But this team's got all 3. When you look at Hawkinson in the mix, you can't get any better than that. If you're a rookie quarterback and you're looking for security blanket, I think Hawkinson is kind of the icing here that these other teams don't have on top of their young wide receivers. So I like it. And I'm going to think about this quarterback. I mean, we know Kirk Cousins put up really nice numbers with Kevin O'Connell. So we're going to be really considering this quarterback, I think, in fantasy. I mean, if we want to say what we saw in CJ Stroud can be manifesting somewhere as a rookie, I think how you're looking at it is Anthony Richardson might be the parallel to Caleb Williams. Like, he was on his way to having something special, right, as a mobile quarterback, using some of the weapons he had here. But I think this particular landing spot builds itself up to possibly be the next CJ Stroud and giving us that rookie numbers right away because of all the supporting cast they have in Minnesota.
Yeah, it is interesting because I have a note here that it's an interesting note to me. So there have been 11 trades into the top 5 to select a quarterback since 1990. And we assume that the Vikings are going to trade up for a quarterback, right? Like, they already got the second first round pick. It feels like they're priming up to trade up. But 6 of those trades occurred since 2016. Only one of those quarterbacks is still with their drafted team, and that's Bryce Young from last year. He's the only one. Only 3 of the 11 quarterbacks went on to win a playoff game as a starter with their drafted team. That was Jared Goff, Mark Sanchez, and Michael Vick. Those are by far the 3 best on the list. I mean, everyone else was pretty much straight really, really bad or pointless. Just since 2016, I mean, these are the guys that teams traded up for: Bryce Young, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, Mitch Trubisky, Jared Goff, and Carson Wentz.
Ugh.
So not a great list there. Maybe makes me a little bit worried about that history. I actually would love if they would have just stayed at 11 and took Michael Penix Jr. I'm really high on him. I think he could have a CJ Stroud type year with these weapons, but it feels like they have ammoed up here to move up. So, but either way, it's a great landing spot, and hopefully they can break history here in terms of these guys typically failing. Now for tight end, I think it's so hard not to just say the Jets because Brock Bowers is being linked to them. I think every mock draft, like 95% of mock drafts has Brock Bowers going to the Jets. And it is a fantastic landing spot. I mean, right now it's Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams coming off an ACL, Breece Hall getting targets as a running back, and nobody else, right? So whoever lands here, whether it be a slot wide receiver or a tight end like a Brock Bowers, they're going to get used a lot. And Brock Bowers has the production of these top elite wide receivers coming out of this class. Like he has that production in school. He has the ability. I think right away, if you were to put in this spot with the Jets, he's a top 6 tight end probably next year.
Yeah, I mean, and you also look at Aaron Rodgers' history. It's not always been great with tight ends. I mean, there's been some flashes. I mean, you have to go back a while to see any real consistent production. They've had like Jimmy Graham and these guys just come through, and Robert Tonyan had that 1 year. So it's just been a little bit spotty, but you got to think of Bowers as being a key part of their passing game. I think it's a different type of offense when you look at Breece Hall being a big factor in the passing game as well. And I think they would like that. It's a bit of a diverse offense where you have Wilson, Hall, and Bowers being your 3 targets here. So I think why Bowers is also being attached to the Jets quite a bit is their draft spot at number 10, because, okay, there's a thought that Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze will not make it to 10, with the Bears sitting at number 9, and thinking that way. And the other way is they also need an offensive lineman. There's a thought that Joe Alt is not going to be anywhere close to that. Would they get any others? Fashanu? Do they like Fuaga? They're at the second offensive tackle. So I think that's also the product of this Bowers pick. And also Bowers is a top 10 talent. So it's like weird to drop him out of the top 10 because he's a quote luxury pick. I mean, for the Jets, I don't think he's a luxury pick. They need to get their offense in gear. They need to give Aaron Rodgers all the help he can get. Keep in mind, he's 40, so he's not going to move around as much. They need a little bit of short to intermediate help where he can get the ball out and get this guy into open field. So I think it's the best landing spot. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, they have Tyler Conklin. I wouldn't be too worried about him. They did move on from CJ Uzomah in the offseason. So, yeah, don't worry about Conklin doing much here. He's a good athlete, but maybe what you'll see is more 12 personnel. And then that'll really help if they have the 2 tight ends on the field with Wilson and Hall. So interested to see what they do, but it can't get any worse for Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers than it was last year in New York.
Yeah, and honestly, the best landing spot for a tight end is probably the Chargers, but we already had them for the best landing spot for running back and wide receiver. But it's also probably tight end as well, but didn't need to talk about them all again. But yeah, if a tight end lands with the Chargers, whether it be Bowers or JT Sanders in the second round, going to be a great landing spot for them as well. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking more fantasy and NFL draft goodness. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.